And so what we'll talk about, we're going to have the folks, I think Erin Keeney is here, and Brendan from Nonspec. Is anyone else from the team here? Or? No. Okay. Did you win any more money last week?
No, contacts.
Okay, good. So they're here from the Nonspec team. That is the team that's developing the extendable prosthetic arm. They won Campus-wide Difference Maker 2 years ago, and they've gone on to raise some money, but I'll let them talk a little bit about that. And then we actually have a professional funder helping companies to think about how do they raise the capital they need to grow their business, how do they build and acquire new businesses. Ethan Jacks is here. Ethan was actually a judge in the Difference Maker competition last year. And his wife Mary Ellen is here. We thank you both for joining us and taking some time. Ethan has been involved in corporate finance and mergers and acquisitions for over 30 years, with a focus primarily in the high-tech media and communications area. He has a BS from MIT, an MBA from the Sloan School at MIT, and a JD from Georgetown University. He practiced law for a while, and then he left the practice to become co-founder and a senior executive at Molten Metal Technology, an environmental technology company which commercialized MIT intellectual property and raised over $400 million in growth capital and grew to a public market valuation of over $1 billion. So he created a business based on a university's IP, which is what we want you all to do, right? That's why we're putting all this time and effort into these programs. In 1999, Ethan moved to digital media pioneer Avid Technology. Did you work at Tewksbury?
I did.
Yeah, Avid was located right over in Tewksbury. They're not
In Burlington now.
in Burlington, okay. So Avid was a real pioneer in the creation of digital media editing. And I know you all take that for granted today, but in 1999, that was pretty cutting-edge stuff. Because before that, in order to edit video, you actually had to cut video, right? You had pieces of cellulose or
Well, tape or film, yeah.
yeah, you had to cut it and slice it. It was crazy, the work to get it done. So computers and digital media, and Avid was a pioneer. Most major television stations, production studios were using technology from Avid. So Ethan served as Executive Vice President of Corporate Development, Chief Legal Officer, and Chief Financial Officer. So Ethan's had some pretty high-level positions there, and met with some great success. He helped drive Avid's strategy to growth through the acquisition of 12 private and publicly held companies. So remember when we were talking about funding, we talked about a range of funding options and how you grow companies, and mergers and acquisitions are certainly a very popular and effective strategy. Since 2006, Ethan has served as a venture capital investor and investment banker for MediaBridge, which is a global industry-focused investment bank that advises companies on growth, mergers, and acquisitions. And so we really appreciate your coming here tonight. And what we'll do is, you know me, I can always talk, but I'm going to save my comments till, why are you laughing at that? I saw that. I'll save my comments till later, and I thought what we'll do is we'll have Erin come on up and talk a little bit about how Nonspec has raised money, and then we'll have Ethan come up, and Ethan will bring us a different perspective on that as a company grows. And think about this for the innovation and technology students. Remember we talked about the growth curve, right? And in those early days, you're looking for little pockets of money and angel pockets and grant funds, but then as you start to go up the curve, you need large chunks of money. And so we're kind of seeing that range. We'll see that range here tonight. So thank you, Erin. Thanks.
How are y'all doing? Good. So as most of you probably know, the first time that Nonspec ever got funding was through the Difference Maker program. And we were actually kind of shocked. We didn't realize that our idea was something that could actually go other places. And once we got that initial funding, we started looking into what else we could do. So with $5,000, which is what we had originally, we were trying to figure out if we should spend it on prototyping, if we should invest in trying to make it a real company. And we realized that that small amount of money, although it seemed big to us at first, wasn't going to last that long. So we actually went out and we started looking for other things that were like Difference Maker, since that's what we got used to. So we started looking at pitch competitions for business and design. And we realized very quickly that Boston is the area for that. If you go online and search for competitions, there's pages and pages of them. And if you start digging through them, you'll see that your idea fits into a lot of them, and some that it doesn't seem to fit in, but if you dig deeper, it can. So that's how we started going looking for funding. So actually the second competition we ever competed in was something that I got in my email, and it was from a professor. So someone had gone out into the workforce and got associated with a group and said, hey, this is an opportunity for a student. Does anyone know if anyone fits this? So I looked at it and was like, hey, that actually works. It's a design. We made stuff out of plastic. Let's see if it works. And we took the time to fill out the application, think about our wording, and we submitted it. And we're just like, oh, we'll never get in, but we tried our best. And then the first week of school, we found out that we did get in. And that was really exciting because when we were looking at all these other pitch competitions, the applications were very similar. So we actually started getting this huge page of information that will say everything we need to know about our company in pages, in 60 words, in whatever, in all these different chunks. And that actually helps you learn about your business and what's important to you and what other people care about for your business. So we kind of became experts at writing those applications, and those applications ramp up very quickly. There's a lot of large grants that are out there, especially in the science and engineering field, and those are ones that we've been slowly digging our way into, but there's also a lot of resources at the school to help you write those sorts of things. So my advice for fundraising at the very beginning is to look them up online, talk to other people, see what you know is out there. And once you start going to them slowly, people will start emailing you and say, hey, you guys fit this really well. And you get this network that will drag you around to all the places that get you a bigger network and more money. And it's a really exciting process. And the other section with that is you're all students, and that's huge. There are so many student competitions, and so many people don't know about them that the chances that you get in to compete are high. So you always want to look for students first, and then when you make that interesting transition into the professional world, it opens up a whole new world of competitions, but you'll have all those competitions as students that you did as experience. So if you look up here, these are several of the ones that we were able to find. Some of them came across in interesting ways. The biggest one that we got was the ASME award through the iShow, Innovation Showcase. And that we actually competed with several local community groups like Harvard and MIT and things like that. And also across the nation. And we've also done other international competitions, which is pretty exciting. And Podcatch is actually a really great thing. It's always good that when you go out and talk to people, you can have a website to give them to learn more about you, but you don't have to sit there and make your own website. You have this little page, they can find out all the important information, and at the bottom, they can donate to you, which is amazing, and you couldn't ask for anything better than that.
So Hawkatch is run by the university, and it's a way that people can make a tax-deductible donation to the university that's actually set up in an account for your project. And so how much did you all raise on Hawkatch?
We exceeded our goal that we put on there, so it was like 2,500-ish.
Yep.
About that much. And we actually just sent out some pamphlets at a competition, or not a competition, sorry, a conference we were at last week. So we're trying to get that slowly out to more people.
And the challenge that Nonspec had is when they did their first competition at the IAPD, they went down, they won, and then all these companies wanted their IP, right? They wanted them, we're gonna give you money and we want you to sign this, and they were brand new. Do you want to talk a little bit about that experience?
Yeah. That's actually one of the scarier things that we've run into as a small business, is big business will come in and say, I like what you guys are doing. Will you take this sum of money and I'll take that off your hands? And it's overwhelming. It can make you feel like you're actually doing something that's worth it, but at the same time, you also kind of want to hold on to it. So As a founding team, we have made a very big point into being on the same page of what we want this company to do. So we know that we're not just gonna sell out. This isn't for making money, this is to help people. And although we're not a nonprofit, we want to actually be able to research and development and branch out into other objects that can help people. But we want to be able to be sustainable on our own. So we have come to the conclusion that we are okay with selling at some point if it's right. And so if the values are continued to be met and if the heart's in the right place of whoever it's going towards, or if they keep the founding team and we're able to do that, there's also so many different facets in there. But your team needs to be on the same page with that, especially if there's one person who goes out and has all these talks with people, these business deals, because you don't want anyone getting hurt or feeling like they got left out of this. And it's an interesting challenge. There was something else.
Did you tell them, did you mention how much you've raised in these competitions?
We've made a bit over $100,000 in a year collectively. And some of those things are other resources that we've gotten. So actually, like in 2 weeks, we're challenging other Boston colleges for a Beantown Throwdown. That's what it's called. So that actually to get money towards our lawyer, happens to be the same lawyers that we already use, so it's perfect for us. But resources, networking, and all of that can be as good as money. And that's really important to know too. And the more you compete, the more experience you get, the more people know about you, and it can never be a bad thing as long as you prepare yourself enough and you look professional. Go for it. Getting yourself out there is what's important.
And we are sponsoring a bus with HAR. Right, HAR? We have a bus going to that?
Yes, we have
Really?
a bus, with the LLC's members signed up for now, but I think we still have space left for people to join us. And
That's
just
really cool.
sign up with the Difference Makers email. Go to email us.
Yeah, we want to make sure you
Lot of
win,
cool-
so we're going to
Yeah,
bring a
there
bus.
are a lot of
We
cool
need your
teams
help
on
to
that.
vote for our team. That's the
It's a
that's the,
popularity contest.
voting audience voting contest.
And I will excuse any of my students who do wish to attend that. It's on the 18th, so just let me know. Do you have any questions for Erin? Yeah.
Yeah, actually, a couple. You mentioned on the applications, you had many different versions that you had to apply for, and you said it also helped you understand what others were looking for in your company, or in your idea. Did you find, what was the commonality there? Was it the potential that it had? Was it the IP? Was it the market it would serve? Can you tell me a little bit about what you found as maybe a common trend or thread on those applications?
I think market was a big one. A lot of people want you to define your market and the validation that you've done within that market. So they find that it's important to know that you've done your research and that you understand that you're meeting needs that are important and that those can be of financial value, that you can actually build something off of that. Then there's people who care a lot about your team. Some groups don't as much, but I've started to notice a trend that people really care about what your team can do and the experience that they have, which I would like to throw out is kind of a challenge as a student. That's one of the tough things. People say, you're a student, what do you know? You've never done this before. And they want to see that you have somebody on your board who's done this. But I've noticed that that's not always the best thing. As students, we have I won't say that we have time, but we have a different schedule, and we can kind of look at things from different perspectives, and we're not bogged down by how the rest of the world does things as much sometimes. So I think showing that you have a different perspective, but showing that you have the support system to not make mistakes that everyone's already done before. Like, you have that network, and you do in this school. So those are the two things, the team and the market.
So on the team piece, actually, I had another question. You said there might be one person out there that's making the pitch. Do you have to vote as a team to whether or not to accept, or how much power do you give that person to negotiate on your behalf?
I think that depends on the point that you're at in the company. So because my team is now, we're actually founded, so we have myself and one other person as a co-founder, so we have to make that collective decision. And we don't have a board yet to do that, but we have a set of advisors, and it's never something that you make a decision on right away. I think it's always good to get a feel for the group and to really sit down with a lawyer or someone who is experienced enough with lawyer things to really analyze that, because there are a lot of tricky things about documents, and it's important that you understand them before you make any of those decisions.
Any other questions? Erin, you're gonna be spending some of that money soon, right? Why don't
To
you
go
tell
to
them?
India.
Yeah, tell them about that trip, I think it's important.
So the school has a program set up with another school in India, and every other year students go to India and they come here, vice versa. So this year it's in India, it's a 2-week class, and we have connections over there at clinics, and we were invited to go work with those clinics and to put our device on people, and that is the biggest thing that we can do for our company right now. It's incredibly exciting. So that's what we have the next 2 months to work towards, is to get products that will work on people. And we're spending quite a bit of that money that we've raised to go. Some out-of-pocket money, which is one of the challenges of being in a startup. You gotta make some personal life sacrifices, but in the long run, it all works out. I think that in starting a company as a young person, you can't really go wrong. You learn a ton, your resume gets enormous, and you have all these experiences to talk about, and you get more comfortable with talking to groups and to individuals. So I've noticed that if I go into an interview now, it's a conversation. I'm not as stressed about it as I used to be. And you just become more comfortable with those sorts of things. And all of these opportunities is what gets you there.
Erin, can you tell us what your device is and maybe one thing you like about it?
Sure. So our core technology is that we have a prosthetic limb that can grow with kids. So with simple adjustment, the same device can fit an 8-year-old and an 18-year-old. And what I think is really cool about it is that it's all made out of plastic. It's injection moldable, so it keeps the cost incredibly low. And I'm a plastics engineer, so there's nothing cooler than that to me. And it can be afforded by 85 to 90% of the world population of amputees.
So you made a point that you're going to test that in India. Why in India? So why can't you test? Have you tested here? Or
So there's two things. One, it happened to be that the school had the connections in India. We've been working with the Deshpande Foundation. And they really want to see us go over there. So that was wonderful. It was sort of channeled for us already, which was great. And secondly, although we are following the process to be FDA approved and to the regulatory system, it takes a lot of time to get all the paperwork through. So since we're going to be there already, we want to just get our basic feedback that we need, and then go through that process and add different clinics to that process. So we'll continue working with the clinic in India. We have people we're working with in Bolivia and in the Philippines and Haiti and Rwanda. And so we want to get them all connected and using our devices. And we do want to work in the US as well, but we have to get all the paperwork settled.
Any other
Is that
questions?
considered a medical?
It is.
It's a medical 510K.
It's a class 1 exempt device. We just have to be monitored by the FDA to make sure that our processes are sound and quality controlled. But it doesn't interact with the human body, it's
Right.
exterior. So.
Indirect.
Yes?
Would your strategy be to eventually market this directly to surgical groups or to medical device companies?
We actually want to go through clinics and through charitable organizations. So potentially our goal would be to sell directly to governments so that the government can solve their health problems. But we haven't figured out the direct route for that yet. So right now our goal is to work with things like people like the Red Cross and much smaller groups. And we also want to start our own Give a Hand Foundation, which will help subsidize the cost of our limbs for the very small clinics that can't meet need.
All right.
There are 54 million amputees worldwide. What?
Between that.
Oh, actually, well, the whole device fits adults as well, so it's kind of everyone. We started with working with kids, but since it grows, we realized they can just keep the device as an adult, but we recommend that they change it every 4 years, so that helps our market stay.
Population? The population?
It's 54 million worldwide amputees. It's always increasing, unfortunately, as well.
Is it like connected to your electric process, or is it just like external? Like how is it operated by the user?
So our device right now is, well, we have 3 different versions. One is a ratchet system, so especially for little kids, they can just use their other good hand to control it. We're also into legs too, but that's kind of a different story. So our main focus was arms to begin with. Then there's the body powered, so you wear a harness, and that movement of your shoulder will activate the hand. And then there's also the myoelectric piece, and we have that set up. It will just be a higher cost bracket, but we're not focusing on that right now, although the technology does work, because we're targeting developing nations, and a lot of the time there's not the electricity need there. So. I don't know how much time it has.
I think that's about it. But thank you, Erin. That
Great,
was
thank
great.
you very
Thanks
much.
a lot.
If you have any more questions, go to nonspec.org, and you can just shoot us emails through that.
And you can often find Erin and Jonathan and Brendan in Difference Maker Central. They're quite
All the
regular.
time.
So.
That's our office.
Okay, I don't mean this lightly, folks. What you just heard was spectacular. That kind of trumps a lot of what I was going to talk about tonight. Solve an important problem, be determined, be creative in how you get financing, establish a network, have an ecosystem that's behind you. It doesn't get any better than that, so well done, very well done. I'll tell you a little bit about what you heard earlier was making the world a better place. I'm not sure as an investment banker I can necessarily claim that, but maybe somehow indirectly. First of all, we bandy that term investment banker around, and lately it's been held in pretty universal derision as the people that created the Great Recession. And I don't doubt that there were a lot of nefarious investment bankers out there. I hope I'm not one. Do people even appreciate what we do? Is it? Anyway, I'll tell you a little bit about what we do.
That'd be good.
It's actually not that complicated. I'll use maybe a rough analogy to real estate brokers. We help people buy and sell businesses. That's the M&A part of what we do. And we help people raise capital, and that's the corporate finance part of what we do. In my case, I have a small firm. We call it a boutique. We have 2 professionals and then a series of advisors who are domain experts. But we are focused like a laser beam on a particular industry, and that's digital media technology. Now, 15 years ago, people would have gone, huh? What's that? Well, I think we all now have an appreciation for the importance of digital media. We consult our iPhones a fair amount of times each day. and you're absorbing and encountering digital media, be it informational, social media, taking a recording, editing it on your phone. In 1988, there were no phones. And frankly, computers weren't even powerful enough to digitize media. And two guys who worked at Apollo Computer, Bill Warner and Eric Peters, said, well, maybe we can build a peripheral device that helps crunch the numbers so that images can be digitized. And once you digitize them, then you can portray them on a screen, much like a Word in word processing. And Bill and Eric created image processing, and that company was called Avid Technology. And Avid literally revolutionized the world of media production, both film and video and audio. So the product Media Composer dominates the world of professional video and film production, and the product Pro Tools dominates the world of music and audio production. Those two guys with only $600,000 of venture capital literally changed the world. They identified a big problem, and slowly but surely they went about and solved it. They needed something to help them get it done, and that something was Moore's Law, the notion that computing power doubles every 18 months or so. And that exponential growth in computing power now allows you to capture and edit video on your cell phone. And thank Mr. Moore for that, and a lot of hard work by some great engineers. So we're focused in digital media. It's a growing industry. We're super busy representing great companies, usually smaller companies with revenue of $5 or $10 or $15 million, being acquired by companies with 100 or 500 million or billions of dollars. And as Aaron suggested, little companies with great ideas are always attractive to big companies because they can do just so much. And frankly, the bigger you get, often the less innovative you get. And so startups are a source of innovation, and big companies tend to have their eye out for little companies. Well, that's good news for me, because that means my clients, if they have a good story, will usually find somebody that's willing to buy them. That assumes they're ready to get sold, and as Aaron indicated, founders have to decide, and we're going to talk about this, do you really want to get sold, or do you want to hold on to your business for 3, 5, 10, the rest of your life? Those are philosophical questions. Okay, so I think we've covered that pretty well. Let's talk about companies. And Aaron gave you a good flavor for what I'm going to call the life cycle of a business. And it's important to understand, if you're an entrepreneur, where are you in the life cycle? Because that will affect your need for and strategy about how to raise money for your business. It will help define the kind of money you need. Do you need debt? Do you need equity? Do you need some combination? Do you need $100,000? Do you need $10 million? Do you need something in between? So it's important to understand, and this is, I should say, more product-oriented than service-oriented. Service businesses are great too. But my talk tonight is going to be mostly about product companies versus service companies. And it's going to have an edge towards technology companies as opposed to, or technology products as opposed to non-technology products. So the first step is your concept. What's your idea? We're going to do prosthetic limbs. Excellent. What does it look like? What does it do? Can I touch it? Can I feel it? And I'm sure Erin came up with, in her team, with some crude, rudimentary implementations. Well, it's going to do this. Well, why is that good? Well, because it does this, and the other companies don't do that. So you have a demo. There's a phrase now which you may have heard, and it's gotten very popular for a lot of reasons, called MVP, or minimum viable product. And there's a lot of pressure now in the investor community to understand what your idea is and what it will look like in its early delivery to customers without all the bells and whistles necessary. So there's a challenge for entrepreneurs to be able to present their idea, their concept, their product with as few complexities as possible, but to still be able to demonstrate to an investor what the essence of the product is, why it should succeed, and why it's different from the competition. And that's often referred to as a minimum viable product or an MVP. And then, as you know, I'm sure everybody's familiar with the phrase beta. That's a word that you see very often in software-oriented products, because it's possible to put your product out there for a beta test drive, if you will, among an identified customer base. And that's a way to say, okay, I've got a minimum viable product. I can deliver it to a third party. They can interact with it. Oh, by the way, I want them to give me information about it so that I can feed that information back into my product design and make it better. And that's what we would call a beta. And then the big exciting moment for any business, and it's a big deal, is when you actually ship your first product. You build it, you package it, you deliver it, and somebody pays you money for it. That sounds easy. It's not easy at all. It's really, really hard. It's really hard. And so that's what we call in the tech world first customer ship. Let's say you've got, people are buying your stuff now, you're getting revenue, you feel like there's a good market there. The challenge then as entrepreneurs and managers say, okay, how big does this thing get? And you start to look at your business from a growth standpoint. Your sales, say, are $10,000 in the first year, and you think they might catch and ramp to $100,000 and then $1 million. What's your growth curve? And how quickly do you think you're going to get there? And also, you've got to start to think about earnings. Am I taking money home net of all of my costs? Cost of goods sold, operating costs, debt service, rent, all the costs of business. At the end of the day, there's got to be a positive number there. If you're losing money, it's like the movie The Producers. It's not a good long-term business strategy, and you can't make it up on volume. So ultimately, there needs to be a plan and a predictable path towards when you're going to get to profitability. And then how is your business going to ramp? At the end of the day, a small business that never gets off the ground or slightly gets off the ground is interesting, it might be fun, it might satisfy some creative urge, but it's not really a business. Business is about growth, it's about predictability, and ultimately it's about profitability. My motto is you should be able to boil your pitch down into 30 seconds, which sounds ridiculous, but over time you'll get there as you'll choose your words carefully, because a lot of people, especially investors, are incredibly busy, and you got to reach them with a silver bullet. This is great because, point. Keep that speech as short as humanly possible. You need to identify your market and the part of it that you address and your market share. Aaron actually did that. That was pretty cool. The size and economic value of your market. What are people paying for your good? Is it a US product? Is it an international product? What's the scope of your business? What's your unique selling proposition? I ask entrepreneurs when I meet them 2 questions, and they're up here. First is, what makes you special? They're usually pretty good at answering that because they feel good about their idea. The second one's a little harder, which is name a company or companies analogous to you that has succeeded wildly. That one they often stumble on because either they haven't thought about it or they can't think of an example. Well, trust me, most investors are all about pattern recognition. And if you can compare yourself to a company that's done well and made a lot of money for their investors, and that you're maybe a step ahead of that business or otherwise analogous to it, investors naturally are attracted to that. And then finally, you've got to talk about your team. Sometimes businesses are all about one person, but most good businesses have a team of 2, 3, 4 people who complement each other, who address different skill sets, and together present a whole that investors can get excited about. I'm curious, Aaron, did you ever have to produce financial statements? Have you even done that yet?
We thought we had to, and we've done it, but we haven't shown them to anyone except our advisors because
Okay.
they're us.
Right.
It's a lot of predicting.
It is a lot. There you go. It's all predicting. It has to be informed predicting, though. A, you got to figure out what your stuff costs. What are your costs of goods sold? And then B, what do you think the demand is going to be, when and how? What can you reasonably think about your sales growth over time? What's your profitability going to be? And that's your P&L. That's your profit and loss statement. And if you're not a finance person, you should talk to a finance person. It's not that hard to produce these things, given all the web services that are out there, and build a P&L that you can defend. Now keep in mind, if you get an investor and you try really hard, and despite your best efforts, that promise or projection doesn't come true, you're not going to go to jail. There's no debtor's prison anymore. It's a drag, but don't let fear inhibit your willingness to be reasonably bold and reasonably comfortable about your projections. This is your story, you want to sell it. We're going to get into a little corporate finance here, and it may sound kind of nerdy, but it's really, really important. And the phrases I want to leave you with are pre-money valuation and post-money valuation. Does anybody here know what that is? Have you, there, see, look at that. You're way ahead of me. The reason this is important is it'll affect and very much control how much dilution you experience if you're raising equity capital. If you're getting a bank loan, it doesn't really matter. You're going to pay that money back with interest. It doesn't affect the ownership, quote, equity component of your business. But if you're selling shares, if somebody's investing in your business, you as the owner, you start with 100% and you only go down from there. You never go up. So remember, you're going to start with 100 and you're going to get knocked down over time as you bring in more investment. Now, the argument for why that's not a bad thing is you start with a pie like this. Let's say your company's worth $100. Bring in investment. Let's say you give up 50% of it to a third party. But with that investment, your company's now worth $1,000. So while you've got 50%, you've got 50% of 1,000 as opposed to 100% of 100. So it's the bigger pie that makes this stuff all work. But to give you a specific example, if your business is worth $3 million, we're not going to spend a lot of time tonight talking about valuation. That's a whole nother set of complexities, which we can talk about some other time. But let's just say hypothetically your business is worth $3 million. And an investor says, I agree, you want $1 million, here's $1 million. Well, what do they get for $1 million? The simple answer is they get 25% of your business. The business is worth $3 million, you add $1 million, pre-money is $3 million, post-money is $4 million, 1 over 4 equals 25%. That's a simple rudimentary example of how investment is done, how you figure out what your investor actually gets, and the dilutive effect it has on your ownership. What kinds of money is out there? Well, the answer is there's all kinds of money, and frankly, this chart misses an important point, which Aaron can tell you a lot more about than me, and that is, and we're going to come to this later, but non-debt, non-equity money grants of one kind or another, in-kind support. I don't talk about that in this presentation, but Aaron can tell you about that. Oversimplifying the kinds of money that's out there, there's debt, there's equity, and there's a hybrid of debt and equity. Debt is a bank loan. Thank you, here's $1 million with 9% interest. You have to pay it back in 3 years, or I'm going to foreclose and take everything you have, plus maybe your house, if you guaranteed it. If you're confident you can pay that money back, that's actually the way to go, because you don't dilute your ownership at all. You just borrowed some money and you paid it back. But if you're not sure you're going to be able to pay it back, or you want the money to be sitting on your balance sheet for 2, 3, 5, X years, then you should get equity. And the issues with equity, as I just talked about, were dilution. You're going to go from 100% to less than 100%. And you're going to have a discussion, and this Aaron is already on this, about what are the terms of that investment? Does the investor get a board seat? Do you as the owner and entrepreneur have to get permission to do certain things or not do certain things? So there are issues of control. We've talked already about the valuation issues and pre and post money. Covenants, that's the fancy word for the do's and the don'ts. You will deliver me financial statements every month. You will have a board of directors meeting every quarter. You will cover the following topics when we meet as a board. And then negative covenants, you will not sell the company or get any additional financing or go into different businesses without my permission. And you will give me a board seat, and every year we'll cover certain prescribed topics, whether you like it or not. call that control. Most investors, especially institutional and professional investors, will have a long list of things that they will have control, insight, oversight of your business that you just wouldn't have without them. Maybe that's a good thing. You want them to have some perspective on your business. Maybe it's a bad thing because your unfettered control of your business is now shared with a third party, and their needs may be different than your needs. Let's talk about the kinds of capital that are out there. And again, I skipped the in-kind or grant stuff, and I apologize for that because it's an important one. Founders. Aaron's a founder. You put some of your own money into this, it sounds like. A little bit. Where does that money come from? It's your money. It's savings. Maybe you get a mortgage on your house or something else of value to you. It's credit cards. You scrape some cash together, and most businesses start with that, with personal finance. Then a natural next place to go is your family. They love you, they support you. Here's $10,000. Gosh, we hope this works. That's a good thing. There are friends. You guys are surrounded by friends. Hey, man, this is really important to me. You're going to get your money back. Give me $300 and help me get this thing started. Those are more kind of insider, conversational, relationship-driven arrangements. When you get down to angels and below, now you're dealing with what I call more professional investors. Angels are a kind of transition between friends and family and the big bad world of professional investors. Angels are often individuals, wealthy men and women, that actually maybe sold their business, want to give back, and are there to invest in your company on reasonable terms. They're not driving a super hard bargain. There are unofficial angels, people who are out there who put money to work, and there are actually angel groups. Common Angels is one in Boston, where individuals will invest on a case-by-case basis depending on the quality of your story. Moving down to seed investors, these are typically either wealthy people or small venture capital firms that aren't in the business of writing big checks. Seed implies a contribution of a more modest amount of money, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, maybe $250,000, but it tends to be in that range. Sometimes they'll put the money in on what's called a convertible note. They'll say, here's the money, it's a loan, but when you get your financing, it's going to convert into equity on a predetermined basis. It's actually a very sophisticated way to get capital from an early stage investor and give them the chance to move that debt investment into an equity investment once you get your next round of financing. Number 6 is the more traditional venture capital world. And their investments tend to get denominated by a reference to a letter, Series A, Series B, Series C. And depending on the company's need for capital, that could become Series F, Series G, Series H. I've seen just about everything. Venture investors are, I'd say, risk-oriented and extremely aggressive in what they're looking for in terms of return on their investment. These are largely professional investors. These are people who've received money from pension funds, retirement funds, school endowment funds. So entities out there with literally billions of dollars to invest will put some of their investments into what everybody acknowledges are riskier things, investing in startups. And as I'm sure most of you know, their intention, their expectation is they're going to get 10 times their money back, 20 times their money back, 100 times their money back. And there are enough stories out there, recently companies like WhatsApp and Oculus, that have actually had extraordinary returns to their investors, and they've only been around for a couple of years because they built products that Facebook snapped up or that Twitter or Google snapped up and were willing to pay extraordinary numbers for. So their investors actually got 10, 20, 50 times their investment. Those are not mellow people. You're going to be working morning, noon, and night under investment from a venture capitalist because they have extremely high expectations for what you're going to do. That's the bad news. The good news is they're sitting on just ridiculous amounts of capital. And if you burn through the first 5 million or 10 million, there'll be more. The company that I co-founded in the 90s consumed almost $500 million of capital. And I hate to say it, despite our goal of recycling hazardous and toxic waste, quite a powerful mission, at the end of the day, it didn't work. Now, we didn't go to jail, but we all felt badly about it. And frankly, we consumed a lot of money in a great cause that ultimately was not successful. So the good news is the VCs have just crazy caches of money. The bad news is they drive very, very hard bargains. Moving ahead, and we're getting down the road a little bit from tonight's talk, which is about early stage. You can go from venture capital, what's called private equity. Private equity is looking at more mature businesses that need growth capital. I worked with a company in Cambridge called Isotope, which has incredible software for audio and music production, electronic dance music, very sophisticated stuff. And they had revenue of $10 million, but they wanted to be a $20 or $30 million company. So I helped them raise $12 million of what we call growth capital, so they could expand their offices, add engineers, open offices in Europe, and do things that just weren't in their budget. But once they had that $12 million, they could just step on the gas and really pump out the business. And they literally are going to double their revenue from 10 million to 20 million in 1 year based on the infusion of that capital. So they had a great story. Private equity firms, unlike the VCs who are looking for 10 or more times their money back, private equity firms look for typically 3 or 4 times their money back. So not nearly as an aggressive a ROI, return on investment, requirement as your venture capital firm. And then of course there's going public. Going public is really exciting. People talk about it like it's the end of the road. It's actually not the end of the road. It's arguably the beginning of the road. If you've got a good business that's attractive enough that an investment banking firm will take you public, that means you've done a great job so far. But make no mistake, once you get public and you're priced at, say, 30 bucks a share, your investors are going to be happy if you haven't done things to make that 40 or 50 or 60 bucks a share. If you remember, Facebook came out at, I think, 40 bucks, and people were kind of unhappy with it, and it sunk down to the 30s, and that was like, you know, what happened here? Where's the prize? Well, Facebook's done a great job, and now it's trading at 70 or 80 bucks, so it's come back. As a public company, you can raise tons of capital, you can create liquidity for your shareholders, so your 20% or 40% of the company that was just paper can now slowly but surely get turned into capital that you get to put in your own bank account. But with it comes an incredible set of demands, both performance, regulatory, governmental. There are just a lot of demands on a public company. So it's a means, it's not an end. And here's one that I think is probably for you guys arguably the most interesting, and it hasn't happened quite yet, but it's probably going to happen next year. You can do Kickstarter campaigns now and raise money by selling stuff, be it, you know, products or development kits, or, you know, if you're making a movie, you get to appear on the movie. There are various ways, or you can just get people to support your idea because it's a good idea and they're with you. What you can't do legally yet is to sell equity over the internet. You can't say, I'm going to sell 20% of my company and I'm going to put it online, I'm going to describe the business, and I'm going to let people bid for my shares. The Jobs Act that was approved in 2012 provides for crowdsourced equity funding. The SEC was required to create the rules so that could be done legally. Those rules are in almost final form. They should be finalized next year. And you will be able to raise, and there are a lot of complexities here, but broadly speaking, about $1 million per year by crowd-funded issuance of your shares, provided you comply with a bunch of requirements, including audited financial statements and things like that. But make no mistake, that's a big deal, and that's going to change the way businesses get financed, because all kinds of services will come into effect that make it relatively easy to comply with the legal requirements. What should you think about when you're talking to investors in your company? Well, number one, you want to think about the quality of the people, as Aaron's already starting to think about this. You know, you're going to have a partner now, and they're not going to go away. They're going to be at the table. They're probably going to be on your board of directors. And you're going to have to live with them. Now, you don't have to love them, but you sure want to be on the same plane with them. You want to have the same goals for the company. You want to work in a cooperative way. And you don't want them, at the end of the day, really telling you how to run your business. You want their advice, but you don't want them just, if you're the CEO, you want to remain the CEO and not give up operating control. So who they are, how they've invested before, what their reputations are, those are all very reasonable questions. It's more than just their cash. Venture capital firms typically have a whole network of advisors, companies in the industry, and they can do a lot of what I call business development work for you for free, because they want to see you succeed, and they will throw in their advice and their relationships as ways to help you, the entrepreneur, who probably could use the help, make some decisions, make some connections, and grow your business. You need to think about how much money do I want to raise. Every dollar I bring in is going to dilute me, so that says, well, less, that I don't want to do too much, because I don't want to be too diluted. But then again, if you built your business plan and you need $1 million, or your idea goes nowhere, then you raise $1 million, and you hope you can get it back to that pre-money thing, keep that as non-dilutive as possible. And frankly, if you get money and you run out and your venture capital firm has deep pockets, and most of them do, you go back to them for more money. Now, hopefully your business has improved. So if we go back to the pre-money valuation, if it was $3 million when you raised $1 million, but now you've done well, so the pre-money is now $10 million, and you raised another $2 million, the relative dilution is going to be that much less. So it's okay to go back, especially if your valuation of your business has gone up. We talked about control, and the legal documents of an investor will have all kinds of provisions for what they can, what you can and can't do as the entrepreneur. The investor will probably want to be on your board of directors and can manifest control that way. And this is probably the most important point, and Aaron spoke to this. When you bring in professional money, it doesn't just sit there. It's a clock that's ticking. And that money needs to become liquid so that that investor can actually give the money back to the people that invested in the venture capital firm with a return. So a liquidity event is something that every professional investor will expect. And that means that you either sell your business in a stated period of time, typically between 3 and 7 years, or you go public, or you facilitate the sale of that investor's shares to yet another investor. But professional investors don't go away. And you need to remember that, because here you've built this company, it's your baby. And now you've brought in a factor, a partner that says, this is great, love ya, in 5 years we're going to sell this, right? And you go, I don't know, maybe. Well, the answer is right. That's the way they do business. That's it, folks. We kind of condensed about a semester of corporate finance.
That was pretty good. Questions? No?
I think that by the time that they get to the public thing, we've been told the focus is on the next quarter. Everything has got a short term, it's like you've got tunnel vision, right? You can only see this small little bit. Is there a trend from the smallest amount of finance to the largest amount of finance where they gradually shorten the amount of time that you're focused on to build? Because you start with a long horizon, don't you?
Well, you do, because you know it's going to take time. And your point is extremely accurate, having been involved in 2 public companies. The obsession with quarterly performance is just that. It's an obsession. And remember, Wall Street is, don't kid yourself, guys, it's one big game. Every dollar made is a dollar lost. It's a zero-sum game. And it's about guessing how a company is going to do. And you as management have to give guidance. We think we're going to have EPS of 7 cents per share on a fully diluted basis after adjustments. And if you come in with 6 or 5, they kill you, okay? In fact, if you come up with 7, but they think it should be more, they still kill you. So every company, public company, sweats bullets every quarter to see whether they, quote, make their number. And they'll actually do dumb things, short-term benefit, long-term costs, to make the number. That's the way the system is organized. Now, companies like Amazon go, you know what? Screw that, I don't care. Amazon has never made money, but they're still worth, many billions of dollars. Because Jeff Bezos has convinced people that in the fullness of time he's going to own commerce and it'll be worth it. So there are a few companies that manage to exempt themselves from that, but not too many.
Yeah, just a quick one. On one of your earlier slides, you went through all the different stages, whether you have a beta test or a demo. Is there any multiple to the value of what that company is when you go through those different steps? I'd advise you to try to get to step 5, which means you have a...
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. So evaluation is an art and a science. But at the end of the day, the companies that get valued the best have already established a pattern of revenue and frankly a pattern of earnings, and that both are growing at a reasonable rate, 10, 15, 20% per year or more. So in software, if you do that, your company could be valued at 10 times revenue. So if you have $1 million in revenue, you can be valued at $10 million because you meet those criteria. If on the other hand you're stumbling, you're not doing it, or you're just early and you haven't had the ability to do it, you're not going to get a professional buyer or investor to give you the benefit of that doubt. So that argues for getting into business, getting your numbers where they're pretty respectable before you go out to either a big chunk of capital or you try to sell your business. So there's value in kind of getting to that level of success commercially. Yeah.
You gave the example of the digital music company that you helped broker the $12 million additional capital. What are the expectations of the company, and what are expectations of the investor for that particular deal?
Right.
How long is investors going to keep their money in, and what do they expect in return, and vice versa?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I made the distinction earlier between venture capital firms looking for 10x and private equity firms looking for 3 or 4. In that case, the investor was a private equity firm. So they're looking for 3 or 4 times their money. So they put in 12. That means they want to get back somewhere between, on top of their investment, another 36 or 48 on top of their investment. And they own, to say hypothetically, about 40% of the company. That means that company is going to have to trade someday for $120 million. So the pressure now is on the entrepreneurs and the owners to get its performance up, just like we talked about, so that revenue is spiking, earnings are spiking. So that when they hire me to sell it, I can sell it for 5 or 8 or 10 times revenue and get enough kitty back so that that investor gets their 3 or 4 times investment, and obviously the entrepreneur is quite well.
Is it something like post-money evaluation, what you talked about? Is it something done on the basis of the how well the company is performing, or how well they are good in the market, or it's just a random research?
Pre-money valuation for an early stage company is a very difficult thing because you're not judging real numbers, you're judging potential. So it's the ability of the entrepreneur to build a balance, to build a projection so they can defend. The market is this, our share is going to be this, therefore our revenue is going to be this. That's a very, there's more art than science in that process. It's a rather arbitrary thing. But if you're a serial entrepreneur, there's a story on NPR, founders of Twitter, Biz Stone and Evan, they got a call from Mark Zuckerberg saying, yeah, I want to talk to you guys. And he said, about what? He said, well, I'll tell you when you get down here. And they said, well, he's probably going to want to buy us. So Biz Stone turns to Evan and said, what do you think we're worth? And he goes, I don't know, 500 million? He said, but we were just valued at 100,000 for financing purposes. Where did that come from? He goes, I don't know. They met with Mark Zuckerberg and said, I want to buy your business, just tell me what you think it's worth. I'll give you a straight answer. And he said 500 million. He went, wow. But he countered at 250 million, and they said, no, thank you. That's how arbitrary